Hello and welcome back, everyone, to Adobe Live from the sofa here in the UK. I can see a lot of you are already in the chat. Happy Monday, everyone. If you do have questions, pop them in there. Today we have Glyn Dewis as our guest. Welcome, Glyn. How are you today?
I'm very good, Stephanie. Thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. And of course, we have Rufus, the man who brought Adobe Live to the UK. Hi, Rufus.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, so it's Glyn Dewis.
Dewis, sorry for my pronunciation.
Dewis, yeah. No,
don't worry, Stephanie. I've been called a lot worse in the past, Stephanie. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah, and hello, everyone. And wow, 270 watching already right here off the bat. And I can see it in the chat is already full. And wow, hey, Dee, Jack, Matthew, Caroline, James, Rai, Barry, RB, Kelly, Chris, Andreas, Daniela, Michael, and Anthony, and so on and so on and so on. This is why we're doing these live sessions. It's mainly for the opportunity for you to look over the shoulders of creative professionals here in the UK. And of course, also to give you the ability to ask questions in the chat as we go along. And this is our second week of these live streams from the sofa. I'm actually in my kitchen right now, but you know, it's okay. Stephanie's on the sofa. Oh, and Glyn is in his office. Stephanie's on the floor. Oh, in front of the sofa. Maybe we should change the title there. Live from in front of the sofa with Stephanie. Hey, yeah, and I see that many of you that you already know Glyn, that you've followed his Photoshop tutorials and things like that. So I'm super happy to have you on the stream today, Glyn, and I'm very excited to see the things you're going to be talking about. So why don't we start with a short presentation of yourself? Who are you, Glyn? What do you do?
I am principally now, I'm a photographer. Started out as a researcher, but now I'm a portrait photographer. I'm based just outside of Oxford in the UK. Yeah, and that's what I do. I've kind of been around the industry, I reckon, probably about 11 years or so. It's difficult to say because time goes by so quickly. But I got involved in the industry purely through the Photoshop side of things. And then after a number of years, I kind of migrated into be the person with the camera. So that is what I do now. And I'm primarily working on a project, which I think we're going to maybe talk about, which was until fairly recently taking up a lot of my time. It will get back to it, I'm sure. But yeah, that's what I do.
And yeah, and this is something that, you know, there's people here from Manchester, from Leeds, Edinburgh, wow, from all over the place. And you're where right now?
At the moment, we're just outside of Oxford. So been here for a few years now. And as we were saying before we went live, we were kind of in the middle of a house move when all this worldwide event sort of kicked in. So that's on hold. But yeah, at the moment, currently just outside of Oxford.
Yeah, and how do you feel? I mean, you know, you're also somebody who's moving around a lot, and now suddenly you're there. How do you cope with this, and how do you find inspiration? What do you do all day?
Do you know, it's kind of, I think because it's probably early doors really for where we're at. The situation's only been just a few weeks, so at the moment I'm kind of feel like I'm dealing with it okay. There has been plenty of things that have been on the back burner which I've kind of got myself organized and getting on with now. So I've certainly, this past weekend, there's content I've managed to create that I thought, blimey, if we weren't going through what we're going through at the moment with the world event, when would I have got that done? So, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. I'm kind of making use of things that I could get sort of needed to get done. But I know there is going to come a time at some point when I'm going to be itching to the point where I just need to get out and do stuff, but obviously I can't. So I think this is where point
I'm at now. Like it's almost a month now. I live in Italy, and and that we were the first. On this beautiful continent, and and it's starting
more than anything though. I think. I mean, I've always loved the technology, but I think more than anything now, more people are loving technology because it's enabling us certainly to be able to do this. But, you know, through something we took for granted before, like, you know, the FaceTimes, the webcams and all that kind of stuff, we can now keep in touch at the very least with family and friends. We can actually see them, which is massive. So I think that's certainly helping to cope with things. If we couldn't physically see somebody on screen, then I'm sure it'd be a heck of a lot harder.
Oh yeah, can you imagine if this had happened 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Anyway, Anyway, we're here, and as there's so many new, 370 now watching, and I'm going to take the opportunity to say it one more time before we look into Glenn's incredible work. We are live every day of the week, including Friday and Monday next week. So from noon to 1, and we're going to be here with some very incredible guests, and of course, you, the community. This is the reason why we're doing all of that, is to be in touch with the community and to share some creativity with you, and also to hear from the community and make sure that we're all good, about this situation, and that we're moving ahead. And I think creativity is one of those things that that keeps us busy in our isolation, we can say. And like Glenn mentioned, it's an incredible opportunity to work on things that were on the back burner, things that we didn't have time for, or things that, like pet projects or personal projects, that people can explore while being in this, let's say, difficult situation. And but we're here on Adobe Live from the sofa with Stephanie and myself and our wonderful guests every day from noon to 1. Glenn, over to you.
Well, I guess really, I suppose it's to sort of mention about this project. Is that what you kind of would like me to kind of go through?
Yes, well, absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll flip over to my screen, and I'll bring up the main particular website as I talk through it. One thing I've always, in fact, I remember very soon as I got involved into the industry, one of the best bits of advice I was ever given was to make sure that outside of the work that you do for clients, if it's something that you do for a living, always have a personal project. And over the years that I've been involved in the industry, I've had a number of personal projects. Some of them have been kind of animal projects where, in fact, I'll just jump into Lightroom actually, where I've kind of, although I have never been on a safari, I kind of wanted to do my little bit. So every now and again, I was just doing animal pictures, doing composites and just playing around. And it was these kind of skills that I learned from doing these kind of things that have massively helped me in my work today. The things like compositing techniques and selections and cutouts and all this kind of stuff has really, really come into play. So with what I'm doing now, but the project I've kind of found the project that I was always meant to do. And thankfully, I've kind of found it at the time in my career, if you like, when I'm ready for it. Because I think if I'd have seen this or thought of this before, I wouldn't have been able to produce the kind of stuff I'm producing now. But this is basically a project where I am touring the UK and I am photographing our surviving World War II veterans, regardless of what their involvement was in that part of our history. I'm wanting to photograph them because I'm a huge believer in the importance of photographs. I can't stress enough how important pictures are. It's way more than just taking a picture with your phone. There is so much more to it, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why I kind of I really feel strongly about this now is because going back a couple of years or so ago, there was something good came from social media. We do see a lot of stuff that shouldn't be on social media, but something good came from social media where I actually managed to get back in touch with a friend of mine that I hadn't seen since I was certainly at school, in one of the early schools. Hadn't seen him, but when I was at school, this guy called Nathan, I've told this story a few times. This guy was a guy called Nathan Black, he was a year above me in school, and he was the kid at school that every boy wanted to be, because he developed quicker, he could do wheelies, he had on his bike, he had muscles, he was just every kid wanted to be him. And then obviously when you finish school, you kind of go your separate ways, and then you all go off in different parts of the world and you all get on with your careers. Now fast forward many years on, and it was only about 2 years ago that through Facebook we managed to hook up again. We kind of got back in touch again, and what I noticed was that Nathan looked very different to how I remembered him. And obviously he'd got older, but he looked very, very different. He didn't look well, basically. And so I kind of went through the thing of doing what we all do, which is the legalized stalking. And I dived into his Facebook and I was looking around to see what could I find out. And it transpired that he wasn't well. He was in kidney failure. So he was kind of looking for getting all these, he wanted a kidney transplant. There was nothing coming forward. And eventually his mom donated a kidney after lots of tests and lots of stuff. But that failed. So it became very, very serious. But to cut a long story short, he had an anonymous person literally, there's obviously more to it than this, but literally go into a hospital one day to say, look, I would like to donate a kidney. I know it's not quite as simple as that. There's a lot of psychological testing goes on for many months, but eventually they did. He had his kidney transplant, and now Nathan is thriving. So what I did was, as a photographer, what can I do? Christmas was coming up. What can I do as a creative? What can I do for him? So knowing how much he thought of his family, because we talked about this, because we did an episode on our podcast with him, and he really, really, the experience he went through totally changed his outlook on life and how he views friendships and family and all that kind of stuff. So I contacted his mom, who I'd known since I was a wee nipper. And we organised a secret photo shoot for taking pictures of his parents and his kids, so I could surprise him with a nice photograph framed and everything on Christmas. So we did this. It went really, really well. And then on Boxing Day 2 years ago, I went to his parents' house. I'm there early talking to his mum and dad, again, who I've known for many, many years. And then I'd arranged for Nathan to come to his parents' house, which he did. And then I presented him with this photograph. And when it comes to when you give somebody a physical print, there's nothing like it. Rather than just swiping through a digital device, when you physical print, there's nothing like it. And that was it. Nathan was just streaming. I mean, really emotional, really, really emotional. And it was like, yes, it's the best thing I could have done for him. However, that was on the Boxing Day. 2 days later, that was on the Christmas Eve. On the Boxing Day, I got a text message off Nathan to say that his dad had suddenly passed away. He died. And it was a complete bolt out the blue. But I don't know how he got the strength to do it, but when I'm talking to Nathan afterwards, he sort of said he was so glad that we did that photograph, because that was the last photograph he's got of his dad when his dad was alive, and it just brings back good memories of a good time. So that's how important it was. So that was there for me. That was almost like a bolt out the blue for me as a photographer, which is kind of crazy to think that it took something like that for me to realize the importance of photography. So with that happening, I then kind of thought, I saw that there was a film that went on over here to do with war history. And I thought, you know what I'd like to do? I'd love to photograph our war veterans, our surviving war veterans, but not just to take a picture like I know the kind of pictures that they ordinarily would have when they're at events and memorials and stuff. I want a classic portrait that can then remain in their family forever, because I know now, boy, do I know how important pictures are and how much they mean to people. I mean, you think about it when, you hear the stories of people's houses burning down. What are they most upset about? It's the photo albums, the memories they want to kind of get. So I started to photograph these veterans, and before I did it, I kind of did a lot of research on it, looking to see what kind of style was there out there that was classic and timeless. I didn't want people to be able to put a timestamp on this. So I looked at work by the people like Annie Leibovitz, Mark Seliger, Yusuf Karsh, just beautiful work that, we looked and years ago, people were going, wow, that's beautiful. And today they're saying, wow, that's beautiful. And they'll be doing the same again in 30, 40 years. Wow, that's timeless photography. And that was the kind of style that I kind of emulated and put my own slant to it. So I started literally photographing our World War II veterans, self-funded, completely self-funded, to provide them with a physical portrait that they could keep. And that was my way of kind of saying thank you, really, because I didn't know how else to do it,
Wow. Well, there's quite a few people in the chat already. There's Dave Clayton, with whom you know.
I do know Dave, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, welcome to the chat. And Kirsty says, I'm at the moment doing a project too. Okay, that's very good. Keeping busy with personal projects. And then, sorry, I'm going to have to sneeze. Let me just mute.
Well, I keep reading while Rufus is sneezing. Jonathan is saying, my granddad was in the war and is mid-90s now, still full of life. You would never know he was that old.
And that's it. That's the thing about these people. I'm 48 now, and I've been doing this project since the beginning of 2019. But I look back to when I was a kid, and I was walking to school, and every day you'd pass these people, these what you class as old people, with no thought or no realization for what they all went through. Do you know what I mean? So for me, this project, I really feel like I've kind of found, and it sounds really corny, and I've said this many times as well, I feel like I've found my calling with what I was meant to do, because although I love what I do, even before I did this project, I love doing what I do. I love taking pictures. I love the editing side of it. I love the teaching side of it. It is so fulfilling, but nothing has ever gripped me like this. It really does feel like I was meant to do this. Do you know what I mean? It's just, I can never see myself stopping doing it either. The only thing I wish is that I'd started it sooner, but then on the back of that, if I'd have started it sooner, I wouldn't have been at I don't think I'd have had the ability, or maybe the creative kind of vision for what I wanted the pictures to look like. So maybe they wouldn't have been like they are now. I don't know.
And are you still self-funding it, or are you starting to have sponsors, or how does it work?
Well, primarily it still is self-funded, Rufus. It's because this was my way of staying back, and I was always very conscious of the fact that I didn't want to be seen to be making money on the back of veterans. That just didn't seem right to me, because very soon, once I started going around and visiting these people at their homes, because that's, again, something that I do, you travel up and down the country and what have you, you very quickly get to hear stories of how, you say, I want to take your picture, and they go, oh yeah, somebody else did that once, and they kind of, I never did see the picture, or they promised this and they promised that. So it was really important to me that I was a man of my word, and if I said I was going to do something, it happened. I actually did do it. So I would take their picture, and I've learned a heck of a lot by doing it about how I should be as a photographer, and etiquette and people skills. In this last, I don't know, was it 16 months or so, it's almost been like a real lesson in people skills since working with these people here. But the biggest thing of all is to if you say you're going to do something, you do it, because it can take a lot of time to build up trust, but you can lose it just like that. And certainly with what I'm doing with this veterans world, veterans families know veterans families know veterans families. And if I do wrong by somebody by simply not following up on what I do, that will spread like wildfire. And then, but it's just massively important to me that I am viewed in the right light and for the right reasons. But yeah, to answer, it's a long answer to a very short question. It is still self-funded. There are things which are happening as spin-offs, like I'm raising some money, or I want to raise some money for certain veterans and stuff. But people do say to me, "But how do you make money if you're doing this?" There are other things that I do that kind of, and in fact, that's something I'm really grateful for, is to have that kind of residual income based business, where you can, if we do have these kind of things happen to us at the moment, where we're having to step back from what we would do day to day, the stress isn't quite so much, because you've got other income streams. And that's certainly something that I think a lot of people would need to look at after this is all over. How can they, what can they do to their business model that could help to generate income once they've done it, but continue to pay, I guess.
That the famous passive income.
Yeah.
And Rob Woolhouse, I'm wanting to find on-trend artists. Where do these guys hang out, or where can I find them? On-trend in the UK and European based. I think, one very easy way, Rob, is to go here on Behance, for example, and you can search for specific creative field and also specific geography. And then by the number of likes, that's how you like define, like what is trending, what is less trending. And that's how you can have a good idea, I think. Maybe you have another idea, Glyn?
Oh, blimey. I don't quite get what the question is there, Rufus. Is it looking for people who
It's for inspiration. Yeah. Like, who are the, what are the trends in photography right now? So
what are the trends in photography? Do you know what? I've never been one to follow that kind of thing. One thing I mentioned about personal projects and how important they are. There's a number of reasons why they're important, and I think this is what I think people should do, and certainly now is no better time than now to kind of come up with an idea. But projects, they kind of keep you they remind you every time you get involved in your project why you even got involved in this world in the first place, this creative world. Because I think if we're doing this as a business, we can become very customer focused and we're only doing what they're doing. And I think that can limit our creativity. But if we dive back into our projects, it reminds us, I love doing this, and it keeps you active. But I remember going back ages ago, Joel Grimes, who's a photographer based in the United States, he was the one that pushed me to do projects. And he said, because one thing you find is that when you, certainly as a photographer, you know, if you've got a full-time job at the time you're doing your photography and you desperately want to be a photographer full-time, you're kind of like, whenever you've got a weekend off, you'll say, right, I'm going to organize to photograph a model on this day at this time, and we're going to do this. And you put all this effort into this one shoot, and you pay for some studio space because maybe you haven't got a studio. You pay for the model, and hopefully they turn up. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully they turn up, because that so many times they didn't turn up when I was doing it. But you put all this effort into that one shoot, and then you kind of like reach this excitement, you get that peak, you do the shoot, you do the picture, you post it out there, and then you drop down again. And then you think, right, now what can I do? So you're in this constant state of peaks and troughs with your creativity. But if you have a project, it is ongoing. It is constantly there. And the strange thing is, even when you're not thinking about it, you're thinking about it. Because you could be going out somewhere for, you know, with your other half, your partner, you go for a lunch, and on the way there, you may see something on the journey and you go, oh, now that would be fantastic location for my project. You weren't even thinking about it, but it's just there in the back of your mind. So having a project is massively important. The first project you do will most likely not be the one that's the one for you. You'll probably go through a couple of projects until you eventually do find that one that's just totally grabs you, like this one has with me. But and basically that's also in answer to Tim's question. I have no income and would love to make money from my photography, but I have no idea where to start. Well, the best way to start is not to stop and to follow your passion, and it takes time. You know, I too started doing business cards for local pubs and local tattoo artists and things like that. And with passion, I was able to move ahead and, you know, and really follow my vision of where I wanted to go. But it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time, and it's not immediate. So I think you've got to, I think so. Too many people, I think, because I made this mistake as well, they want to get into the business side of things too soon. And the danger with that is that once you get into the business side of it, the thing that you really love to do becomes very serious. And it takes on a whole different meaning. Do you know what I mean? Rather than you doing it because you just love doing it, you're now doing it because this is my source of income. And then you'll very quickly find as well that thing you love to do, you do less of because there's all the business stuff to get involved in. I would say, and this was only because this is what I had to do, is really almost forget about the business side of it. Get so comfortable with what you do, develop that style. I'll talk about that in a minute if you want as well, because that's something that you can't force. It just kind of happens. But get so comfortable with your stuff, because what you want ideally when you do get into business, if that's what we're talking about now, you know, from what the lady just said then about wanting to do it full time, what you never want is to be hired because you are cheaper than the next person. You want to be the kind of person that's hired because they go, I love what you do. And then way down the line, the question is, oh, by the way, how much are you? Because if everybody's doing the same thing, and there is a lot of that going on, if everyone's doing the same thing, it's always going to be the person who's cheaper that gets the work. And that's the last thing you want when you think about the time and money and whatever you've invested to get to that point where you're at now, you know?
And Michael East says, the photo of my granddad in his Navy uniform evokes a lot of emotion in me and our family. It's great that you're continuing this sort of work.
Oh, so maybe you know what? It is. I can't even begin to explain how much this has hit me. I've made some incredible friends, and this is the thing as a photographer. You get so many people say to you, "Oh, have you ever photographed any celebrities?" Do you know what? Every single time I go and photograph a veteran now, I can go, yeah. Every time I go and photograph a veteran, because all these celebrities, these movie stars, they're acting the parts that these people really did. Do you know what I mean? So these are the real celebrities. But the stories, the humility that I kind of come across with these people, it's just phenomenal. And you just find yourself really, I've shed more tears than I would dare to admit doing this project. There are some people I've become incredibly close to, and the really sad thing about it is that there's definitely pros and cons, but the sad thing about it is that I know I've lined myself up for a lot of heartache. I know I have by getting to know all these people really, really well. But put the heartache aside, I know I've done a good thing by allowing to photograph them for their families to keep, so these people are remembered.
And I think we have a good segue here from Richard. I love the soft painterly lighting in Glyn's portraits. I guess he takes a mobile studio with him, or do his subjects always come to him?
Great question. No, again, because thinking about it, the people I'm photographing now, all of them are mid to late 90s and beyond. So it's always something that I will do I will go to see them. However, with that, you also have to consider that you're going to see an elderly person. I'm a stranger. Initially, I'm a stranger. So I'll always ensure that there is a friend or a family member present. That's good for them because it gives them a little bit of a safety blanket, if you like. But it's also good if you think, nowadays it stops anything untoward being said or accused later. Just on, you have to kind of think of this kind of stuff. But regards to equipment that I take, I've learned to really reduce the footprint of the kit that I take. Whereas before I'd be taking 2 light stands, a crossbeam, a background, and then lights here and lights there. I've really minimized it because some of the environments and spaces I get to shoot in are really challenging. But I kind of love that. I get a perverse pleasure out of that because it makes me really have to think, right, how can I deal with this? So whereas I would have used a studio light before, I now use speed lights, these 4 AA speed lights. I use a softbox. In fact, if I dive over to my Lightroom, I can give you an idea of what kind of setup it is. So this is when I've been photographing a guy called Harry Billings, who's just been awarded the MBE by the Queen. Just a fantastic, wonderful gentleman. But you can see here, this was taken in his front room, and it was quite a challenge because he had this kind of archway in the middle of his room, which meant the background had to be on the other side of that, and then the height of the room wasn't very big for my softbox. And thankfully, he's not a very tall man, so we managed to do that. But this was me doing his close-up portrait. But you can just about see in the bottom right-hand corner of the frame there, one of the arms of his 2-seater sofa. I had to go behind that and lean my camera against the sofa to be able to do the 3/4 length shot, which the final picture of Harry was this one here. So you have to be really adaptable. There was another guy, I think I've got I have actually. This guy here, this is a guy called Laurie Whedon, and he was a glider pilot, and he landed a glider for the Pegasus Bridge D-Day. Just no engine. The bravery of these men was just insane. But when I actually went to go and photograph Laurie, this is what I was saying about learning so much because you're forced into environments you wouldn't ordinarily be. We had the only space we had in his house to photograph him was in the galley of his kitchen. Really small. So the little things that you start to learn, you think, right, okay, we're now limited on space here. Ordinarily, I would use a large softbox because I want to, I feel that it's appropriate that these people are photographed with a soft light. And that's why the background is a very soft, subtle, muted kind of texture and what have you. But because the space was so limited, I couldn't use my large softbox. So knowing how light works, all we can do there is we can use a smaller softbox. But because it's having to be in closer to him, that gives us the same softness of light as a big softbox further back. So it's just being adaptable to your environments and stuff. So real simple setup. And following on from what that gentleman was asking there, one of the questions he said about the kit, you'll notice in every single shot I'm always using a tripod. Some people would say, well, why using a tripod if you're on a using flash, because that freezes it. The main reason.
Has the daylight been a problem?
No, because the actual the shutter speed and the aperture of the setup for this allows it so that you're pretty much knocking out all the ambient light in the room. And once I've done that, I tend to use. I kind of explain this in one of the tutorials I've done, where once the flash is off, I'll have my camera settings. I'll be looking straight at the subject, and you can see it's a pretty dark picture. And then what I do is I tend to then use the ISO to bring up the ISO just so I can start to see a little bit of detail in the areas of the picture I know the flash won't hit. And then turn the flash on, then we take the shot. And I know that you can, we could use all kinds of sliders like the shadow slider and play around with exposure and highlights and what have you in Lightroom and Camera Raw and stuff. But little things like that can be done in seconds on the shoot. But that's generally tend what to do. But the actual reason I use a tripod is mainly because these aren't professional models. The minute I'm getting to get to know these people, I don't bring any equipment into their house at all. First of all, when I turn up, that remains in the car because I want them to get to know me. I want us to have a bit more of a relationship before we even think about taking a picture. Once we've had a cup of tea and a bit of cake, which I've got to be careful of the amount of cake I'm taking now, but then we'll have a bit of cake. And then eventually you get the kit in the house. If after all that time I've spent to help them to relax and to kind of feel accustomed to the fact they're having a picture taken, if I then shove a camera in front of my face, it can almost undo all the work I've done to help them to relax. So by having on a tripod, as you can see in the screen that I've got on Lightroom here, you can see that they're framed on the back of that camera perfectly. I'm above it, continuing the conversation. So it's almost like they don't even think about it. It just happens. We're talking away. This gentleman here called Reg Charles, who literally did change my life because he from something he said, he made me want to go and speak to my mom again, who I'd not seen for 16 years. So got a lot to thank this gentleman for. But, I'm just above the camera talking, taking the shots. And it's a pleasure. It really is a pleasure to the point that they go, "Oh, have you finished?" They don't even know you've done it. Do you know what I mean? I've learned a lot. I love it. It's made me a better photographer having a project like this. It really, really has.
We have a question from Luke. He's asking, did you consider using film on this project, or were you always set on digital?
Do you know, I never considered using film for this one. It's something I've never done. I was brought up on digital. I was at school. We were the first year that ever did the computer studies. The only camera that ever had a film in it, I remember, was when I was a little kid, and we used to have this little roll that was within a compact little plastic unit, and then you'd take it to the local place for the 1 hour delivery, and then look at a roll of 24, you probably end up with 2 pictures that were good. But I've always done digital. To be honest with you, I used to kind of think that people who are doing film, and this is only my own thoughts, with all the digital stuff we've got going on now, whenever I used to hear people sort of going on and on about doing film, I used to think, oh, get over yourself. Do you know what I mean? You're trying to be too arty. I take back what I used to think now, because now I go, do you know what? I can totally see where you're coming from, wanting to do it, to replicate and to actually do that old style look. Because all the pictures I looked at to get the inspiration for this project were all taken on film. Do you know what I mean? And they had a beautiful look about them. So, but the only filming I'm doing, if we're going to use the word film, is I am interviewing these people as well once we've done the photo shoot. So. Yeah.
So you actually document the picture, and you have some sort of historic background to the picture as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because as a kind of like not a spin-off, but another facet of what this project is, it isn't just to give the veterans and their families this portrait. It's also to do with the education side of it. Because on the main website, which is just 3945portraits.com, you'll see the portraits on there, but at the top there's also an education side. So in there's all kinds of stuff that's been added in. If you click on like the memories bit here, there's interviews that I've done with some of the veterans as well. And actually Dave Clayton, who's in the room now, I know his daughter, one of his daughters, was studying this part of history. And I believe they actually brought up the website in their class at school. And I think they listened to a couple of the videos. So, because I think that there's certain, speaking for the UK, there's not enough done to educate the younger generation, I don't think, about what went on. Do you know what I mean? From both sides. It's just important to get both sides. And it's just, I'm not going to even give it away what some of these people talk about. One thing I never wanted to do was talk about the blood and guts. They're always asked about that. And I didn't want them to talk about that, because if you think about it now, that part of history there, we're talking 75 years ago now. There's 75 years of life that these people have lived that nobody seems to want to talk about. So I wanted to talk about that as well. But when I do get them to talk about, that wartime, it's about the training. It's about, was there any characters that you remember being, working with, and any stories you can think about with those? And that's what I think is important that the kids get to hear as well. Do you know what I mean? The humorous side of things as well, because there's humor in everything. And there is, when I listen to these guys talking, guys and girls talking, it's amazing the things that went on that we just don't know about, that were really funny as well. And that's good to hear,
Do these people know each other?
A lot of them do. A lot of them do, because of, they all get together when it comes to memorial ceremonies and stuff like that. They all kind of meet and stuff. But there's obviously a lot that don't. But what's really encouraging is how many veterans we have, because I didn't think there was many out there until I started this, but there are, there's a lot of veterans out there, which is great. I mean, this guy here, I don't know if you can see it on my screen, I'm just putting my cursor over it, this little video, this guy called Alan Scott. Wow. I mean, just amazing. Former Spitfire pilot, and just, I see Alan every week. I was until recently. I've seen him every single week, going out for a cup of tea, and we have a bit of cake, more cake. But, and you think, I'm sitting and talking to this man who did what he did, and it's just fantastic. It's totally gripped me. It really, really has, and I love doing it. We had an exhibition. The first exhibition happened, and we had the BBC TV news were there as well, filming it, and it just went, and the publicity it got was brilliant. There's a book being commissioned for it as well. I'm doing some fundraising. Once this madness is all over, we've actually created a video. There you go. There's something else. While all this stuff's going on, I'm working massively hard on my video editing skills, and we've created a video which is going to be used to help to raise funds for the charities, 2 particular charities that I know really well that do a lot of stuff for veterans. I'm going to be doing a tandem skydive. I found out this morning I'm going to be doing some abseiling off a really high building in London. Yeah, it's just, this has gripped me, and this is what you want a project to do to you. You want it to grip you. If a project is effort, it's not the right project, and you'll find another one that will come along and come along and come along. But how do you find a project? By doing loads of projects. It's like, how do you know what you want to do as a photographer? You decide to take pictures of everything. When I started, I did weddings, food, bar mitzvahs, portraits, you name it. I did everything. And I very quickly found out what I didn't like, and it left what I did like, which is doing these kind of portraits.
So maybe we can also see a little bit of how you take the picture, and like how you take the raw picture and then you edit it so it like fits into the grand scheme of imagery, I guess.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
There's a note from Peter Tumkeys here. Glyn, your photographs of the veterans are very moving, and the importance of this project cannot be overstated. It is a powerful and wonderful thing you're doing. Yeah,
no, that's
I
really
wholeheartedly
nice.
Agree.
Very nice to hear. All right, so we've talked about the photography side of it. Just as a reminder, you can see the simple kind of setup that we've got. I'll go back to that picture of Harry Billings. Real simple setup with the lighting. The lighting is positioned in a way that gives us that Rembrandt style of light. And in its simplest terms, the light is to one side of the subject and further forward of them, so that the light hits one side of the face and manages to touch a little bit on the other side. That's the basic premise of it. So that's that kind of stuff there. But when it comes to the actual retouching side of it, I don't take that many pictures when I'm doing it either. I don't take many pictures at all, because you don't want to overdo it. And because of the amount of practice that you do doing this, you shouldn't really have to do a lot. But I don't do much in Lightroom. Let's just try and find, I'll go to, let's just I'll bring up a typical kind of shoot, let's say. So we've got Harry Billings's images here. So you've got like an out of camera kind of shot there. I don't do much I'm not somebody who does a lot in Lightroom, I'll be honest with you. I know there is so much that you can do and so much that people do, but my happy place is Photoshop, and that's where I work the quickest. But the simple kind of things I will do, I'll bring it into Lightroom, which is primarily used as a way for me to catalog my images. That's generally what I'll do. And then if I've remembered to, I would have had a grey card and I could tap on that and sort of get the white balance just right. But if I just kind of take it through here, I'd bring up a little bit of detail on the shadows, even though I did that with the ISO initially. Let's have a look here. We'll do the white balance. Thankfully, I always use a grey background, and some people sort of say, do I ever use a different colour? I don't. I generally stick with grey because, again, it just works for this look. And I would just tap to give me a rough kind of a white balance there. I'll do a little bit of sharpening. When it's a male portrait, I will just take the sharpening up to around about 35, something like that. So bring up to 35-ish, and then I'll use that masking slider just to control whereabouts it's going to be. So, just onto there, just so it covers Harry. Lens corrections, this is more of a habit than a necessity nowadays because our lenses are way better, but I'll always do the remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. And that initially is all I would do in Lightroom, as crazy as it sounds. But then that would then take me into Photoshop, where we would end up with something like, if we go, let's say something like that. So when we get to this point here, again, it's purely for the style that I want for these pictures. Is I kind of realized that all those ones I looked at for the inspiration were very much a square format of picture. So the first thing I will do is create a square format. This background initially is a 7 foot by 5 foot, which is ideal. And because the background isn't too detailed, it's very easy for me to create that square format now. So I literally would just unlock the layer, the background layer. I'll get my crop tool, and then I'll just drag outwards so that I can start to now add in some extra kind of detail in there. I never tick the checkbox at the top of the options here when I'm using the crop tool. I don't use the content aware there because I've got to say, and I'm not saying this because we're doing this on Adobe, but the enhancements that have come in with camera, the content aware fill, blown me away. I mean, over recent years, the things that I absolutely loved is camera raw as a filter and content aware fill. Absolutely love it. So what I'll do here, then I'll just get my marquee tool. I'll just quickly make a selection of the areas that I want to fill in with that background. Let's just do that there. And then we'll dive over to the content aware fill. Absolutely love this. Couple of things I've kind of learned that you have to do is just make sure that you don't try to rush it. Always make sure that the little spinning wheel in the bottom right hand corner is finished before you do anything, I would suggest. But you can see I love having this preview. I think that's just fantastic. You can obviously play around with all the settings on the right hand side. Ordinarily, you'd probably want to remove this green overlay here so that it doesn't think about using any of the content within this area here to fill these outside bits in. But it's pretty good, and it just makes its own mind up and says, we'll fill it with that. Once I've done that background, I'll then take it back into Photoshop. But one of the areas that I want to show you that is almost like the clincher for giving it the look to the pictures I do. Let's just wait for this little spinning wheel here. I might even just cancel that. I'm going back to Mac, by the way, and I can't wait.
Why is that? May I ask?
Well, the reason is I was using Mac for years, and then it got to the point where the system wasn't powerful enough for what I wanted. So I then got a PC, a Windows PC, which was powerful enough. And I've now found that I think if you're going to be a Windows user, you've got to have a little bit of savvy about the computer itself. Because maybe it's my computer, I just find it has moods every now and again, and things that worked yesterday don't work today. Whereas I didn't find that with the Mac. I found that it just slowed down. It still worked. It was just slowed. That was all it was. Right. So that's how I would do create that square crop there. But let me just dive over to a picture that is pretty much finished and take you through the layers. You can see here, this is where I've increased the bits on the right-hand side. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But the next thing I would do is a frequency separation, and I've got videos on this. We haven't got long to dive into doing all that, but I only use it a small amount, and the reason I use it is you'll be able to see as I turn that frequency separation group off and on there is that you can use it for sharpening the eyes and getting rid of any kind of like shine on the skin that you don't want. Real simple, just there. Next thing I do then is we do a dodge and burn. So I like to do the dodge and burn on the actual grey layer there. If I bring that up, you can see what I've basically done. I only tend to do the dodging and burning on the face because that when people look at these pictures, that's where I want them to be drawn to, straight onto the face. So that's the area that I want to really kind of have stand out. Let's just go to here, put that to the texture. You can just see some texture being added. See the texture just off and on there. That's the new texture slider within Camera Raw, which I love. But I want to get to the bit which I always love to show, which is the colorizing, the actual adding the kind of look to it, because there's only so much you can do creating a style with your lighting. Do you know what I mean? There's obviously the lighting and the post-production go hand in hand to create your particular style. So I want to just give you a quick overview of how I do my how I do the colorizing on these pictures here. And it's using something called lookup tables, which obviously you're well aware of, but I have totally fallen in love with these. And let's tell you what I'll do. I'm going to create a duplicate so we can get back to the point where I can get rid of them just there. So how do I use these lookup table adjustments? I think it's, you have to correct me here, Rufus, or not, but I think it was CS6 when they were introduced. So we've now got lookup tables here, the adjustments in the top right-hand corner. And I absolutely love these. Let's just show you how I use these.
Yeah, it's very similar to, what we have in the video products. And that's where,
absolutely,
to give like a continuity and various bits and pieces of video so that they all look the same.
And yeah, that's right. And what the great thing about them is, with Photoshop being the way it is, there are so many ways you can do things, and it can get confusing as to what people think. Well, how do I do this? How do I do that? It doesn't matter what you do as long as you get the result you want. However, there are easier ways of doing it. And without doubt, lookup tables have made colorizing incredibly easy when it comes to your pictures. The way you use them, for those who don't know that are watching now, you've got like a 3x3 grid in the top right-hand corner here of our adjustment layers. And when you click on that, you get presented with the properties, and you've got 3 menus. Generally, you're only going to really use the top menu. Okay, and the great thing about these is you create a recipe. When you first click on them, you're going to go horrible, don't like it. But the great thing about these adjustment layers, or these lookup tables, is the fact that they are a layer. And with layers, we have blend modes, we have opacity, all sorts of stuff that we can do. So we don't need to use it at its full strength. We can just lower it down to something like 20%. We can kind of start to build a recipe up now. Now, if I want to add another one, obviously I'm not going to go to the menu here and change it. We actually physically click to create another layer. So we'll go from tension green, we'll go to edgy amber, another one. There might be a use for that, as it is for some pictures. It's certainly not for this one, but I would then just take that opacity down. And this is generally all I will do, and this is what I did do when I first started this project, was play around with pictures I already had to try to create a recipe of colours that I could then turn to. I'll add another one. We've got one here called Foggy Night, and take that down to opacity there. Now, I have actually got ones I've made myself, and this is the great thing about how we can use the Photoshop and also Premiere Pro. Of all places, I started to make my own lookup tables in Premiere Pro that I could then use in Photoshop. And that is just, love it, absolutely love it. So if I show you here, there's one, I'm going to go to the menu here. We'll just click on Load 3D LUT again, which brings up my little finder, if you like. And I'll just go and show you a number of ones that I've actually got. LUT files. So these are ones I've generally made, and I've actually got these. There's ways you can create your own lookup tables from recipes that you make in Photoshop, but also how you can take the coloring from a movie, another picture, and create a lookup table. It's just that little thing that you've got in Premiere Pro where you can do the color match, or match color, I think it is, in match color, where you can make 2 different bits of footage look similar. When I saw that being demoed, I think it was Jason Levine who showed, wow, that's clever. He showed how you can match 2 video footages to get it's a video footage together. I thought, wonder what happens if you put 2 still images on the timeline in Premiere Pro and then use the same technology. And it worked. I was like, wow. Because I took a screen grab off YouTube of the movie Fury just to see what it would do. I put the screen grab into Premiere Pro on the timeline, put one of my own pictures next to it, pressed matched color, bang, and it created it. I then exported that, created a lookup table, and here we go. So I got one here called... You can match
color in Photoshop as well, right? I think
you can. Do you know what? And funny you should say that, because somebody asked me the other day, is there any difference?
It's a very old feature, but I think it's still there.
It is still there, but it doesn't have a patch on this. I've got to say, it really doesn't. But this one here, 1940s RAF, is one that I created. Click on load, it'll then add that in. And then we'll take that down to, again, 20%. And then I finish off by doing a black and white adjustment. loads of ways you can do that. And obviously now with Camera Raw, with all the presets that we've got in there we can play around with, I still turn to a gradient map. I love gradient maps. So I just literally set my foreground and background color to their default of black and white. I go to a gradient map, not that, will reverse that. And then I just lower the opacity of that one down just to knock out a bit of the color. So that's generally the kind of thing that I would do when it comes to the colorizing of the pictures. But let me just take you to one further step. And this is something, in fact, I'll show you on this one here again. I will actually show you that. When you do the colorizing, what I tended to find was, although it made the majority of the picture and the clothing look good, I didn't like the effect it was having on the skin. It just didn't look right, especially when it's being printed. So I wanted to take it off the skin. And the way that I do that was to put all of the layers that are used to create the color into a group. So we'll go here and we'll go new group from layers. Just call that LUT, lookup tables. And then add a layer mask to it. And the way that I would take it off the skin, ordinarily you'd kind of think that you'd just get a black layer mask, sorry, a black brush, and then paint it off. And let's say you wanted to maintain some of the color but not all of it, and we'll take it down. Let's use a brush here, say 30%, and we'll start to brush it off. Let's take it actually to 50 so you can see it quicker. Let's take the opacity up to 100, flow to 100, and we'll start to kind of paint it off. And let's take that to, in fact, let's just go back just a tick. Let's take that down. If I wanted to remove, let's say 50%, you'll take it down by 50%. The only problem with this is when you say you want to reduce the colouring on his skin down to about 50% of that, you've got to be really careful not to lift your mouse or your brush off the face, because then what you're going to do is you're not going to get an even removal of that colouring off the skin. You're going to get this kind of thing. And obviously we want it to be removed evenly across the skin. So basically all I did for then, I kind of thought, well, there are things that we've got that we can use which are real simple. I would then get the brush and take the brush to 100% opacity, a black brush, and I would take it off completely. I'll do this real quick. Obviously any areas that you go over, if you spill over, you can just change the colour of your brush to paint it back on. But I'll just take it off completely, and you can see how strange the skin can look when you've actually got that. It looks like a really pinky, but that's the real skin colour. So that's it. That's off, removed off completely, but we want to get some of it back. But what I can do now is, if we look at the layer mask, that's what we've got here. It's removed it completely. But I can now use this density slider to control how much I want it to be removed. So if I did want to reduce it by 50%, I would just take the density slider down to say 50 on here. And we can see if we do the before and after, in fact, if I turn the layer mask off and on, you can see what that's doing there. So that's the full and that's 50. And there's full and 50. And what that density slider does is obviously controls how dense that black is. And that just allows you to create an even removal of that color off the skin. So I absolutely love doing that. But lookup tables, I totally love. I'm going to show you one other little thing, because one thing that people...
I have a question in the chat from Matt. He's asking, when you printed these for the exhibition, did your style of photography suit a particular printing paper, and did you print them yourself or use a printing company?
Okay, so when it comes to the printing, the ones that I give to the veterans and their families, I print at home. Up until recently, I could do up to A3+. I can now do A2. We've got a bigger printer. And I love printing, and I'm actually using fine art paper now. I don't know if you can see on the screen there, but I use this one here. No advertising for Permajet, but I love this. It's called Portrait Rag 285. It's a fine art paper, cotton-based paper. I love it. And it's a good question, because it's amazing when you get into the printing how you can see how different mediums change how the actual picture looks. You know, if you printed these kind of style of pictures out here on like a luster or a gloss, they'd look awful. But on a portrait rag fine art kind of paper, it really does add to that. You know, it reminds me of that old look of the pictures I was looking at when I was getting inspiration for this project in the first place. So it does that. But I print them myself here for the exhibition. I used a company in the UK. I'll give them a shout out, called Digital Lab. Absolutely fantastic company. And there's a guy there who works for them, who he actually, I don't know how he does it, but he just knows paper inside out. and he just knew the right kind of paper these pictures would work on. I left it to him, and when they produced the prints, quite big prints for the exhibition, just stunning. You almost have to take a step back and go, wow. Do you know what I mean? They look, you can't beat print. I can't rave about it enough. The print side of things, I absolutely just love it. I really love it. The retouching side of it, it is straightforward. It is really, really straightforward. However, there is one thing that I do to almost every portrait, regardless of the fact that it's a veteran's portrait. This will be any kind of portrait, because I want these to stand out. I want them to almost feel as if they're coming forward, especially when they're printed. And it's a step that I do at the very, very end of my retouching. And I kind of try to be clever and give it a name by calling it depth building or something like that. I don't know. But basically what I'll do is this. I'm going to remove this. If I just turn this top layer on and off, hopefully, I don't know how that's going to come across on the screen there. But if I turn this layer on now, you should see a little bit more kind of impact in the face.
Yeah,
so,
sharper.
Yeah, it's sharper. It stands out. Now, one of the things as photographers, as creatives, we know when we look at pictures, we know our eyes are naturally drawn to the areas of the picture that are the brightest, the sharpest, and the most contrast. So I thought, well, how can I make it look as if their faces are coming forward? We'll then add varying layers, if you like, of contrast and what have you to the face in certain parts to make it come forward. This works especially well on the really close-up portraits. So the process for it is this. Let me just I'm going to create a merged layer at the top of the layer stack. This is pretty much the last thing I always do. Just create a merged visible one just there. And I'm going to go to filter, sharpen, and unsharp mask, which is a fantastic way of adding contrast. And you really can give it some when you're doing this here without starting to get any kind of halos or changes in color or anything. It's brilliant. The only thing to remember is whatever you put the amount at, keep the radius at the same as well. The threshold, just keep it to 0. But for these kind of portraits here, I would generally, let's say I'll go for 20 for the amount and 20 for the radius. I would then click OK. And obviously that's applied it to the whole of the picture at the moment, but I don't want that. So I would then just simply add a black layer mask to it, get my brush, a white brush. Let's just get a brush there, white brush. And I would paint it in initially on the whole inside of the face here. So it's I don't go to the ears, literally just the middle part of the face. Something like this. If I just press the backslash, you can see this kind of area just here. Then the last thing I would do is I would create another merged layer to the top of the layer stack. And then I would repeat that process. But this time, rather than me doing it straight onto the whole face, I'd only do it on the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So we go to filter, sharpen, unsharp mask. This second layer of contrast we're adding here is half of what we just did before. So the whole face was 20. And now these intricate areas here, we're going to add an extra 10 and then just click OK. We add a black layer mask, get a brush, and I would literally just dab on the eye, dab on that eye, do a line down the nose and go across the mouth. So I'll show you the layer mask. You can see what we've got if I just show you that there. Oops, I don't want to press the, see, there you go. That's another reason to get rid of it. The keys are too. So there you go. So we literally go eyes, nose, mouth. And by doing that, it really does give the face just that little bit more life, well, especially when it's printed. You can see when it kind of goes off and on there, how it just brings the face to life. You don't need to do it to the rest of the picture. If all this picture here, the rest of the body had that kind of contrast, your eyes would be hunting as to where to go. But when you see these pictures, you go straight to the face. And that's, I believe, is because we've added that extra depth to them that you're drawn into. So that's that there. And once I've done that, I save it. Thankfully, now we can save large files because I always keep the layers when I'm doing this. Always keep the layers. And they always come out at around about just under 3 gigabytes for the picture. I think it's 4 gigs now we can actually save as a PSB, and it'll still be visible within Lightroom. And to finish the picture off, it's just a case of me I'll generally, obviously not on this picture here, but I will go to the effects tab and add a little bit of grain in as well. About 36, 37 on the grain. And that for me gives the kind of look to the picture that I want to have. So that's that there.
That's so awesome.
had
And as Nigel puts it, this is so interesting. Glyn, thank you so much for sharing. And I can only say the same. Stephanie?
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, we have a question from Jonathan. He's asking, can you capture this information from another photo as well? And can you show us how?
When you oh, do you mean the actual colouring? Is that what Jonathan's asking?
Probably.
I don't think we've got the time for that, but I can certainly. Hey, you can dive onto my website, glyndewis.com, and there'll be a link to it on there.
glyndewis.com. Absolutely. And maybe Tim can put the link inside of the chat. Yes, unfortunately, we don't have time to go into any more details, but I think, you know, your workflow is amazing, like how you put these sharpening masks and stuff like that. And of course, what is more amazing than anything is your work and, you know, this intention that you have to photograph the war veterans in the UK and tell their stories and give their families a memory of it, which I find truly amazing and inspiring.
When you give a picture to somebody and the reaction you get is then sort of literally just to the point of tears, although you don't want that, because that's a bit nasty to want them to cry. But when you get a reaction that's really like, wow, it's the kind of reaction that we should all be striving for as creatives when we give a piece of work over that somebody goes, wow, rather than giving them a screen to go, oh, that's nice, that's nice, that's nice. Nice. If you're not printing, start printing, because it's just the best. So
thank you, Glyn, and thank you to the community who has joined us here in the UK today. You've been amazing. A huge amount of you have joined us today. And I just want to make sure that you know that we will be here every day from noon to 1. We started last week on Monday. So if you want to watch the replays, if you scroll down on the Behance page, behance.net/live, you will find our little thumbnails with the little Union Jack. And these are the ones that we are doing here with UK artists. So tune in tomorrow and the days after. We will also be streaming on Friday and Monday. Yes, because we know that we're all home. We're all, more or less blocked into the situation, and we don't want to leave you alone. And we want to give you the creativity you need to make the most out of these days of isolation. And Glyn, again, thank you so much for your amazing project, your insight into your workflow, and of course to you, Stephanie, for always being here and helping me out with these live streams.
Thanks for having me too. Thanks, Glyn. Thanks, Rufus, and thanks to the community.
Thank you very much.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.